What's up, everybody? Brady Figueroa coming at you with another one of my favorite albums, and today we're talking about what is, as of right now, the one and only Ibaraki record Rashomon, released back in 2022. Bear with me for this video because I've been a little under the weather this week, but I've been wanting to make a video about this album for a while, so I'm going to push through it. So, for anyone who's not aware, Ibaraki is essentially the solo project for Trivium frontman Matt Heafy. And this record was like the perfect album for me to get into around the time it dropped because, for one, Trivium is one of my all-time favorite bands. They were a huge gateway band for me getting into extreme metal. And given that this album is very much an extreme metal record, this was like the perfect transitional album for me at the time because when this album came out, it was around the time I started to really dive into extreme metal. So for that reason, if there's any Trivium fans or anybody watching this video that is pretty able and comfortable listening to bands like Trivium or, their peers, but feel like kind of exploring extreme metal, I would absolutely recommend this album to you. If you're not super familiar with Trivium's music, this album probably wouldn't feel like that much of a deviation from it. As a Trivium super fan, to me, it's completely different. Although there are some elements and parts on these songs that would feel pretty comfortable on a Trivium record, especially one of their more progressive records like Shogun or their last one in the Court of the Dragon. Kind of going off of that though, this album is a very, very difficult album to categorize as far as subgenres. Matt did work with Ishan of Emperor, obviously very well-known black metal band, on the production front. And there are definitely black metal elements on this album, but I'm not sure if I would call it like a full-on black metal album. I think the overall broad label of progressive metal here would probably be the safest label for it, although this album really is all over the place stylistically. And when you hear Matt Heafy's delicate, clean vocals on track 4 and track 8, side note, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the titles on this album, but moments like that do very clearly depart from what otherwise could be potentially a black metal song or album. And on the topic of Matt Heafy's vocals, I gotta say, this may just be his best vocal performance on any album to date. Fans of his will know that he has a specific style of harsh screaming that he does on the Trivium records. It's the same style that caused him to actually blow out his voice. And although he has learned new styles that sound different, he still uses that same kind of harsh style on the Trivium records. Although I believe recently he did actually find a way to use that same style without hurting his voice, so that's awesome. But my point in this is the fact that this isn't a Trivium record. It allows Matt to use these new vocal styles. Like, his screams on this album, they still sound like him, but they are, to my ears, and as, again, a Trivium superfan, clearly in a different style. And we get to hear Matt do some more new styles of clean singing. Like I've already mentioned, those really soft, tender moments on the tracks I mentioned, track 4, track 8, track 7 as well, which is something that's rare in the Trivium catalog, but something that Matt pulls off beautifully here. It's always so rewarding, listening to one of your favorite musicians of all time, just being able to make whatever they want, whatever kind of music they want to make without having these restrictions and rigid barriers of the band that they're in. This record, to me, Rashomon, just sounds like Matt Heafy just being so free with his creativity. And I just feel like he really just did whatever the fuck he felt like doing on this album, which, again, is great to hear. I'm just realizing this now with the other album, or the next album that I'm going to do a favorite albums video on. I'm going to have pretty much the exact same compliment for it, even though it's a completely different album stylistically, so stay tuned for that. But another element that I really enjoy about this album that makes this album extremely unique as well is the overall Japanese imagery to it. Going off that last point I made about how Matt kind of just did wherever he wanted on this album, for those who don't know, Matt is half Japanese, and to me this album sounds like he really dove into his heritage a little bit, which again is awesome to hear, especially just because of how well it played out. And I'm not too familiar with the actual specific themes on these songs, but to me there is some clear storytelling going on. There's some elements of mythology and just overall maybe historical elements too. Or I guess folklore would be a good way to put it. Like track 9 tells this, to my ears, the story of this monster who feeds on kids or something like that. You have to read the lyrics. And then near the end of the song, when you get like that whimsical, quiet part that has a touch of like polka to it, like, and Matt Heafy's singing in that low register, it sounds like he's singing from the actual perspective of the monster. The line he says where he goes, "I just want to ingest every single one of your sisters. Is that too much to ask?" makes me crack up every time I hear it in the best way possible. That song is definitely a highlight on this album, by the way, especially just in its overall like melodies. It has like this almost like sugariness and happiness to it, but it is like such a dark song. I mean, you just heard the line I read from it. Like, all these elements together just shouldn't work, but Matt makes them work beautifully here. And all the different parts, when especially that kind of polka part does kick in, it reminds me of something that like BT Band would do. A somewhat unorthodox compliment for me that I'm going to give this album is that the intro and outro tracks I find to be really enjoyable, despite them being pretty much just solely intro and outro tracks. Like, the intro track has some really delicate, again, kind of like Eastern melodies to it that I think is great and a very good way to set the mood of the album. I think it does it really well. And then the closing track is like this completely off the wall like polka song. Like, I don't know what this song's about, because like he's singing about like he wants to break your soul in two. Then he says he calls you my love. Like, this song is just absolutely insane, but it sounds awesome. It really does. And this is nothing like anything that I would ever listen to on its own, but somehow it just works on this album. As far as other songs that serve as highlights for me on the album, track 2 is an absolute monster. One of my favorite moments on the entire album is when you get those like really dramatic and melancholic strings that kind of play in the background. They first prominently appear at exactly the 3-minute mark, and just the melodies in there just fit the song so well, and they add this beautiful extra layer of emotion. The song might also have perhaps my favorite chorus on the album, just with those double bass drums. It's thunderous. You got those vocal melodies from Matt, which sound awesome, or vocal harmonies, I should say, excuse me. And then after that string section, you get a musical section that perfectly illustrates that kind of subgenre blending I was talking about earlier, because you get like those black metal-esque blast beat sections, but then there's those like delicate vocals over them. It sounds great, and I can't think of any other album or song that sounds like, especially with the overall Eastern influence in it. There's that jazzy, clean guitar section after that. Just, the song is a roller coaster ride. It really is. Track 3 is one that I have very similar compliments for as well. Just, again, that absolutely towering main riff. You get like that sort of pre-chorus riff, which is really bendy and is played in a 7/4 time signature. Love that. It kicks in right at the 2-minute mark, actually. Matt was on point with these timestamps being right on the minute marks. But probably my favorite riff on the album, honestly. There's some more really full and layered strings in the bridge section, which are a bit more prominent than they were on track 2. I absolutely love track 3 as well, which is, again, a song that very clearly tells a story about, I think, like a courtesan who was maybe like a sex slave at some point in her life. Like, it's a heartbreaking song lyrically. And these despair-filled lyrics matched up with this really dramatic, melancholic music makes for probably the most emotional song on the album. Which is another definite overarching compliment I have to give this album, is that it is very emotive, yet it never blends together. Like, these songs all stand alone in their emotions and just in their parts. Like I've already mentioned, tracks 2 and 3 are just these thunderous, just steamrolling tracks that blend all types of extreme metal together. Track 5 I would put in that group as well. Track 7 is, mood-wise, probably the most black metal-esque song on here, because it does go for a lot of those like creepy, eerie melodies. The one that appears at the 50-second mark, is one of my favorites on the album. And the majority of the song does follow that mood, although there is more of like a tender, soft break in the song still, of course. Track 8 is one that just has all of these mood swings, because when it first starts, it's this kind of like, it's very melodic, but it also kind of feels tense at the same time. And it flows really well between that, again, really dramatic and passionate sounding chorus with Matt Heafy's clean vocals, even some whoa-ohs thrown in there that actually sound great. Mostly because they do kind of have sort of like that Eastern exotic flair to it that fits the album. They don't just feel like octane. And these parts are contrasted with those black metal-esque high screams that are actually done by, of all people, I shit you not, Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance. Like, he actually guested on this song and did black metal vocals. And this song probably just overall is the most epic track on the album. And then I've already singled out track 9, which is emotionally the most confusing track on here because I really don't know what I'm supposed to feel, but I mean that in literally the best way humanly possible. Just skip to the 2:35 second mark on this song. That chord progression pretty much sums all that up. And then, of course, there's that whimsical off-the-wall section at the end of the track that I still think is ridiculous, but I still love it. This is just such an incredibly tight album. Track 5 is one I didn't really talk about, but that's probably the most, like, Trivium-esque song on here because some of those riffs do very much bring in those elements of 21st century metalcore. But then again, you do have Nurgle showing up from Behemoth, so that definitely sets it apart. So yeah, that's about all I have for this video, guys. Like I said, if you haven't checked out this album and you're a Trivium fan, if you're an extreme metal fan, if you have any kind of crossover there, I highly recommend to check out this album. And if you are familiar with it, comment below your thoughts. I would love to hear them. And until next time, again, thank you guys so much for watching. I got my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links in the description of the video. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.